Hi, it's Tammy here from Moda. Today on the Midnight Moon Quilt Along, we're going to do the 4X block, which is this block. I've already sewn some borders on, which is going to be farther down on another time, but I just wanted to show what the block looked like. Today's talk, I'm going to talk about pressing on some of the where we meet and connect the little points. These blocks are oversized that I've done right here just for show, but what we're going to do is you're going to cut your squares that you need, the 3 different colors, into quarters like that. And the reason we do that is because the outside of the block is straight of grain, and this is your bias area, and you'd like to, if you all possible, whenever doing bias, keep that on the inside of the block. It helps from that extra stretching. So once we've cut it and then we lay out what we want our block to look like, then we're going to pair up the 2 triangles to sew first. And I'm going to sew here, and then I'm going to show you what I do next. Okay, now that I'm at the sewing table, I've already sewn the 2 triangles together on both sides, as you can see here and here. Now, as a beginner, it's good to press towards one fabric, and then you're going to have a locking. So this seam allowance goes this way, the top one goes that way. So I can come in and actually feel that lock. And if you peek inside, you'll see you'll get a nice crisp point. And one other good tip is when you're sewing this is always have the seam allowance, if possible, going towards your needle, because as that stitches down, it helps lock that in. So this one's already been sewn, and I got that locked in, and you can see I have a nice little point there. Now, since I had pressed these towards that one fabric, I've got a couple options here on pressing this second seam that I've done. One option is to press the seam open, and I would take it to the ironing board and press the seam open. I still have several layers right here. I have the bottom layer, 2 seam allowances, 2 seam allowances, and another layer. That's 6 layers of fabric. So when you're like machine quilting over that or hand quilting over that, it's going to be kind of tough. So one other way that we can do that instead of pressing the seam open is you kind of pop the seam. So you just kind of push, and you one seam allowance one way and one seam allowance the other way. And you can kind of come in and even do a little clip. And then I would take that to the ironing board again and iron that way and that way. And that kind of helps distribute the seam allowances all the way around, and I can feel it that it's a lot less bulky right there. So on my sample here, I've done that in this case. Here I've pressed my seam allowances that way, and here I pressed the seam open. On this one, I did like I just showed you, pressed the seam allowances the first time to get my locking, and then I pressed one seam allowance one way and one the other way. So I got that little kind of 4 pouch in the center. My favorite way to do it, which is maybe a little bit more advanced, is that I press the first seam open. So I press, when I sewed these 2 guys together, I press that seam open. And then when I press that one, I press it open. Now, I don't have a locking mechanism there because of the seam allowances. I do have to use a pin, and I come in and stick a pin in it and see if I'm good to go. I'm gonna move that bottom one down just a little, just a hair. And then I sew that seam, and then I press the seam open the second time. And boy, I know you can't see it, but boy, that really keeps that laying nice and flat. And when you're machine quilting or hand quilting, you just go over it really easy because all the seams are evenly distributed. So this is just a little sample I did of every one. So hope you have some good luck this week in making your 4-star.